Well, welcome everyone to this exclusive LinkedIn Live episode. I'm the moderator for this afternoon, Llazani, and I am joined by four great experts in the world of branding and design. That's Jason Schwartz, the creative director at Bright Great, David Kippen, the CEO at Evviva Brands, Kelly D. Williams, the creative director at Superbase, and Matt Diefenbach, the CEO of Turnstyle. Thank you all, gentlemen, for being here, and thank you to our audience for tuning in live as well. There will be a Q&A portion from the audience toward the end of the episode, where you may get up on stage and ask your burning questions to our panelists. Let's first get started with 15-second introductions from each speaker. Matt, would you like to kick things off by telling us about you and your agency?
Sure thing, Ray. Thanks so much. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Matt Diefenbach, principal and founder at Turnstyle, headquartered in Seattle, Washington. We're a brand and design studio. We just turned 20 years old last year. I'm still thinking we're just getting up and running. So I'm excited to hear from my colleagues here who joined. We build brands from the ground up. We evolve and refresh brands that exist and are going through changes or strategic initiatives that require that. And then we support a lot of brands that have matured but require that area of expertise to help guide them through their business initiatives. We're industry agnostic, so we have and continue to work and support in pretty much every industry that we would like to play in. And we find that variety keeps our design team fresh and our thinking current. Happy to be here.
Great. And Kelly?
Yeah, great to meet everyone. My name is Kelly D. Williams. I'm the founder and creative director of Superbase. We are a branding and design consultancy. Prior to jumping on the call, we just had a really quick intro amongst the group here, and it's really cool. It seems like a lot of us do very similar things, but it seems we each have our own proprietary processes and approach to helping our clients solve their problems, using things ranging from design to messaging. So I'm just excited for this conversation because I feel like I'm going to learn a lot and hopefully it will be valuable to everyone.
Great. And Jason?
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet everybody virtually and excited to be here with some really cool creatives spanning the globe. I am the creative director and founder of Bright Great, and I also run the Type Foundry Avondale Type Co. and act as creative director. Similar to kind of what Matt and Kelly have talked about, we industry agnostic, creative. My primary focus is user experience and digital experience. So how a brand extends into some of those really unique interaction points. My background is from 25 years ago, industrial design, which is always about how people interact with things, which translates perfectly to what we touch and what we do and how brands are, in our space. So happy to be here and looking forward to seeing some interesting questions.
Great. And David?
Hey everyone, I'm David Kippen, founder and CEO of Evviva Brands. We are an evidence-based, strategy-led agency with offices in San Francisco and Edinburgh. And like everybody here, I think we dabble in a lot of things, but our core is figuring out the brand job and helping equip the brand for the job it needs to do. Sounds like a simple idea, but it turns out to be endlessly fascinating because not every brand is doing the same job. So very excited to be here, excited for the conversation, and looking forward to your great questions.
Great. And David, we're actually going to get started with you. So your agency has worked with name brands like Amazon, Delta, and Marriott International. So what are some of the biggest trends you foresee shaping branding and design? And really, I guess the year that we're in now, 2025, and many of the years beyond, what are these companies telling you? And what are you seeing from the industry as a whole?
So that's a lot of questions. Let me start with the first one, because I think the ChatGPT just turned 2, and I'm probably the oldest person in this group, so I've been through a few technology revolutions. I've never seen anything so transformative and so fast. And I think if we were able to look back on this moment for 5 years and we weren't foregrounding our conversations with basically the impact of large language models, we'd be feeling pretty stupid. But it's not just in terms of design and branding and identity. I mean, do this thought experiment. Imagine you have to go, you're going to go buy a bolt, something really stupid, something you don't want to think about. And you say, I need a 5-inch long stainless steel bolt. Today, if you put that into a search engine, you're going to get kind of a mess. You're going to have to do a lot of work. You're going to have to do a bunch of clicking into a bunch of locations. And most of us won't do that. We'll just buy the first thing on, the first page Google gives us. But imagine this. Imagine you say to your GPT, I need a 5-inch stainless steel bolt for this purpose. I don't want to pay more than $2 for it. Find me one. And imagine instead of giving you a bunch of websites, it sort of creates instantly a little mini website that's actually 3 shopping carts that say, hey, here you go. Here's the closest one. Here's the cheapest one. Here's the strongest one. What do you want? Can I give you more? That sounds great, but if you think about the back end of that, that means it's building a microsite on the fly. That means that all of the UX, UI, and stuff that we build today that shapes the brand relationship to the maker of the bolt and the owner of the bolt and the owner of the store, that all goes away. All of that is superseded by a completely different process. And that's just one small example of, you could come up with 50 others of how everything we touch is going to be transformed. And that doesn't even speak to things like tokenization in our own processes that say, yesterday it used to be you'd have to come up with kerning ratios. Today you could just have a token that says kern everything this way that applies everywhere. Same with shadows, same with color, and so on. So your brand book tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, it's not going to look anything like the brand book today. So in a nutshell, I think that we're going to live in a dramatically different world of technology, brand, strategy, and UX and UI, and it's going to come at us blazingly fast.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Just to kind of add to some more context there, when you say, you sort of talked about like the micro platform within GPT, would you advise clients to presumably still create their own identity and create their
Absolutely.
own touch throughout their website? Or would you tell them, hey, we need to focus more on this? It's like SEO, but rather SEO for the AI platforms. What's your stance?
So I think our world is going to diverge in 2 directions. I think part of it is going to become a lot more technical, a lot more engineering-like, and it's going to remain creative, but I think it's going to be creative in very different ways. But the other part of our world, which has to do with what we talk about when we talk about a brand identity, that's really talking about the who of a company. We obviously didn't evolve in a world of brands. We evolved in a world of people and animals. So we're really good at intuiting things and kind of creating mental maps of the people and things around us. And we use that same emotional framework to evaluate brands. Now, on the other side of the net, brands have done a pretty shitty job of responding to that because they haven't had the tools. I think what clients need to be thinking about is, okay, if a lot of the visual signaling and the voice signaling that I used to be able to control is going away or changing, but I still have a brand person that's going to manifest itself in interactions with customers all over the world. What does that do to the person of my brand? How do I think about identity when so much of my identity is going to be mediated by technologies that I only vaguely understand today? I think that's where we're going to go. I think we're going to get there quickly, and I think it's going to be fascinating.
Great. And Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of piggyback off David's comments as well. How do you feel that brands and clients really ought to prioritize their design, their journey, and branding in general? It's obviously important, but when you speak to clients, do you find yourself having to sell its importance? Are you thinking along the same lines that David is thinking of? Where are you and your agency at with that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and David, wonderful observations, and I love that thought treatment that you gave, that you provided, because you basically described my buying behavior today in like a nutshell, which is like the first thing that comes up on Google, I'm buying it. That's it. I'm on to the next thing. It's interesting because as a brand identity firm, so much of what we do is developing IP for organizations. And one of the things, at least today in this moment, AI cannot replace is IP.
Yeah.
And so we have AI companies hiring us, which is kind of an irony in and of itself, to develop their identity because their own tools can't do that for them.
Yeah.
So we get to play, at least today, in at least a little bit of a buffer zone, so that the craft that we do, the value that we have always brought to companies remains. The things that are changing around us is a lot of the downstream work that usually comes once the identity is established. And we have to, just like when this came out and changed the way in which people view websites, we had to completely change our thinking about that and evolve in real time how to do that. We've also and are continuing to evolve how we both embrace that, how those tools can help support the work that we do, but also in the areas where it's going to replace, really dig in with our clients to make sure that they're recognizing that the value we've always brought is at a higher plane than where a lot of these tools are serving them and their marketing communication needs. And so as long as we can continue to keep those conversations at a higher plane, we have relevance. And oftentimes it's around identity, it's around brand, it's around creating that emotional connection that you need your customers to have with you, and that your team needs to have about where they work, that builds value in your company, and that creates all of the expressions by which people need to think about your service, product, offering, organization in a way that's unlike somebody else. And I just don't see at this moment some of the things that are happening in the AI world able to replicate that yet, or at least in a way that's authentic and genuine. And so that's kind of the space that we try to play in, and continue to manage those conversations at that level. Let me know if I've answered your question in the way you asked it, Ray.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sort of an add-on question there. If the system and processes, as consumers start kind of bypassing websites in general, do you feel there's a risk of a disconnect between that end consumer and that brand if they can't even get to the end consumer, if there's kind of this middle now? Do you feel that's a risk?
There's always risk involved. Yeah, I think for the deeper connection. So when we think about this, is you have the availability heuristic in your brain where it's like you have to quickly sort and identify and gravitate towards things that you have some sort of a connection to. And David was talking about this earlier, whether it was before we started this or as part of his intro, where we're people and we have this need to connect with things and make decisions that aren't necessarily based on the rational, but actually informed by irrational decision making. And so the better we can generate a brand that can connect with humans, that's going to be the thing that gets people to choose you over somebody else, even if your product, service, or business is not the best thing out there. So certainly those tools can replace some of that decision making and maybe disconnect you from the service that a brand could provide. But in order for people to choose you, or to sort of, if they have options, the one that sticks with them is the one that they're going to go with, whether or not that's the best option out there. If they've heard of you, if they know you, if they have a neutral or positive association with you, those are all going to be the things that mitigate that risk that you were describing.
Great. And Kelly, we're going to turn it over to you. We had a whole portion of this podcast, by the way, dedicated for AI. So I'm happy that David just kind of went straight into it. and those first remarks. I think it's great. But Kelly, what do you think, or how do you think creative directors in general will work with AI in the future? And to what extent do you think creative directors should be working with AI?
So I really do think that's largely dependent on so many factors, like the industry that their clients are in, the type of product or service that they are helping to direct. And the reason I say that is because consumer behavior really differs based on that. So just to kind of lean into what Matt was referring to, and even David, when it comes to products where maybe like price or convenience trump brand, or quality, or any of the characteristics that maybe a brand would be known for, I do think that people will bypass the brand experience. They're less particular about it, because if price or convenience are the most important value propositions, then all the romance that we try to build around brand and everything like that, it's just fluff, right? So we really try to work directly with businesses where brand and IP is already valued, where it really matters, in order to set people apart, not leaning into the idea of price or convenience, which would be what would inform buying behavior, that just was like, first result, that's what I'm going to buy, right? And the reason I wanted to start with what these previous conversations were about is because I really think that threads into AI as well, and how people will use it. So I feel there'll always be that need, since we are mammals with souls. We will want to connect with brands that we resonate with, and this isn't regarding price or convenience. This is regarding brand. So creative directors that are, make sure they don't forsake that connection with the customer will be everything. It'll be so important, because the reality is that this is the quality of their work, right? So me as a creative director, everything I produce, I'm putting my name on, I'm putting my reputation behind, and I have to be proud of it. And I don't really want to leave that up to tools that either I don't understand, or they're still progressing, or whatever the case may be. The quality of the work has to be there above all,
Great. And Jason, what are you seeing in the industry in general? What are some brands that you think are doing branding right? And what exactly is it that they're doing right?
Before I answer that, I actually think I have the thread to loop David, Matt, and Kelly all together based on what we've all talked about. So I know we're spending a lot of time on AI. The first thing that I wanted to say was that not all of our brands are for sale. We work with universities and we work with organizations. And so all that bypass stuff that we just talked about doesn't apply. And they're going to need to still maintain their soul. The tying what David and Matt talked about, and Kelly, I thought you were going to go there, but I'm happy you didn't, because you guys ate up all my bullet points, is human authorship when you talk about AI, which I'm going to start at the most legal level and back up. You can't trademark, that was what Matt was talking about. You can't trademark or copyright something made by AI. It has to be human made. So right off the bat, a brand cannot build themselves fully on AI at present. There are no laws in the US that you can trademark some sort of mark, but how AI works is by learning from other things that other people made. So when you're talking about creating a mark, creating a painting, creating a logo, creating a part of a brand, all it's doing is learning from what it trained from. If you go into AI and say, make me a Banksy, you get a Banksy. Problem is that that's probably a copyrightable style that you cannot use. And businesses and brands are not smart enough, if they just let the horses run the track, to be able to say, this is our new photographic style. Okay, well, it's, Ansel Adams, black and white, trained, whatever. You're probably not able to use this kind of stuff. And I don't think that there's knowledge there yet for people are lying about how their models are even training. I think Facebook or Meta announced yesterday, or someone announced that Meta was training from just all the torrents that were on the internet. Great place to train from, but you're stealing everyone's ideas. The additional piece of that is fonts and type and all those things. AI can't make that, really. It's training and learning from other sans serifs, other display fonts. And so you run the risk of actually not knowing as a company that you will be trying to use assets that you can't. And that's one piece. The second piece is idea generation. And when for years, we have the boards and we're sketching and we're talking about ideas. And I know, David, you were talking about how the advertising space has always been kind of like put up the idea and pull off the sheet. And it's like, bubble yum, here's your answer. And it's like, I've never done that ever in my career. It's always about working through very early with the clients what the aspiration is, and we can get to the goals versus a voila moment. But Meta announced this week that they believe that in 2 years, 50% of all their code could be written by AI. First off, that eliminates a lot of jobs and is scary. Second off, if AI is writing Meta's code, which goes to Kelly's point about known brands using AI to generate things, I guess I have some questions about who is going to own Meta when that gets to a majority of the code being written by a computer. Legally, right now, it can't be owned by Meta. It's Meta's code owned by AI. So that's my second point. And when we talk about brands using this, everyone on this panel has a brain. That is not how every designer in the entire industry works. There are, for every thoughtful, caring, soul-providing designer, we all love this. That's why we do this. There is the Fiverr designer who immediately goes to an AI-generated tool and comes back with, here's 10 options for your logo. It's been this way for 10 years, no soul put into it. The question that I have related to should a brand be using this is, if you hire someone and you aren't sure about their agency, how do you know that a human made it or a robot made it? And that's where I'm going to leave that, because those points, I think, tie all of that together, but probably open more questions than answers.
Yeah, and why does that matter? Why does it matter if a human made it or AI made it, right? That's really what we want to be able to address, because that distinction is more than merely ethics within the design community or the creative community, but it's also kind of like, how does it matter? Why does it matter? And how do we make sure as an industry we can always help inform and educate brands on the difference?
And a brand would want to own most of their brand, right? So yeah, by hiring going through the internet and being like, $25, who wants to take this project on? Most likely you're not getting real work, but also you're probably getting stolen work, which has been the case not from AI for already 10 years, but now it's even easier when you go in and you create a prompt that says, I could literally create a prompt that learns the major design agencies' brand launches. Go to this URL, look at all of the logo marks that are created within here. And you have, if you were looking at an NYC firm of, some level of fame, you could basically create your prompt to copy the 10 best partners of this firm and generate your logos. The problem is, like I said, it's pulling from what exists. And so those things you may or may not own. But I would be pretty scared to roll things that matter of my brand off that I didn't know that humans touched.
Great. Yeah, great insights, everyone. So maybe I'll ask this question to just the broad panel in general. What are some actual use cases where you see brands doing branding correctly? Like what exactly is it that they're doing? And I'm mainly referring to maybe something that you've seen or worked on yourselves in the last like 3 months or a work in progress. Which clients, which brands are headed in the right direction, you feel like? And Matt, you could take this. David, we'd love to hear from you.
I'm going to punter for a second on the example. So, David, if you've got one, I'll let you go first.
Well, let me. There have been a lot of interesting comments, and I don't think any of us want to rabbit hole into this is AI and it's going to eat your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because that's not true, right? I think I want to respond briefly to what Jason said. Yeah, I'm with you on everything you're saying in terms both of the importance of the human element, but also I think it's easy to see or to envision what's coming as a change in product. That is to say, in the robot's going to make your logo tomorrow. I don't think that's the way it's actually going to happen. I think it's going to be much more initially a change in process. We're going to collaborate a lot more tightly. We're going to ideate a lot more quickly. We're going to standardize and integrate systems like your Figma, your Canvas, all of the platforms will have back-end integrations supported by systems that make it much more organic in the near term. And so, I mean, I don't think, I'm not trying to oversimplify what you said, Jason, at all, because I think you made a lot of good points. But I don't think it's just about the product. And that ties to the question. I don't know if I want to put a gold star over any brands right now, but I think where the brand opportunity is well, brands are always about differentiation. They're always about finding the white space. And in fact, Kelly, you were talking about commodity brands where there's just price. Branding started in commodities, right? How can I charge more for coffee? If I can create some special thing around the coffee, call it a third space, maybe I can charge more for it, right? So there's this process we go through in building brands that says, I'm going to build your identity around what's unique about you. I'm going to premiumize that uniqueness, and I'm going to try to do it in a place and in a way that's hard for others to replicate. That's been the playbook for a long time, and it's worked really well. I think the new ingredient in that's going to be premiumized, and I don't know how it's going to work, is us. Right? So the Fiverr example is a great example of, yeah, that person you're paying your $5 to probably spent 30 seconds making a prompt and they made $5. At the other end of the spectrum, you all have been part of projects that were ridiculously expensive, took a huge amount of time, and you shifted a Pantone shade a few degrees lighter or darker, thickened the lines, dusted things up, and you thought, for what I could have done, you didn't pay me nearly enough. For what I actually did, you paid me way too much, because there's sort of a political process from the design standpoint behind the design. But forget about all of that. I think what's going to be premiumized is human contact. It's going to be people on the other end of the line, but it's also going to be consistent service standards that I know to expect. So, for example, one of our clients, Marriott, was Ritz-Carlton. They do a phenomenal job in creating a culture within the organization that enables you, whenever you go to any Ritz-Carlton, to have a Ritz-Carlton experience that's not around the brass and the glass. It's around this idea of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Today, that feels nice, but not special. But tomorrow, I think when there are going to be increasing numbers of not people manifesting themselves as people in every IVR and every contact we have with every brand, I think the premium experience is going to be, I talked to a person. The person was great. The person was empathetic. The person cared. The person was competent. And I think some people will be willing to pay a lot more for that. I think other people will say, actually, I just want competence. I want efficiency. I don't care. So I think it's going to be very interesting. And I think the people brands are the brands that have a huge new territory to explore. And I'm very curious to see where this goes.
Yeah.
Can I counterpoint that?
Sure.
So, and I don't want to, I'm not putting down the human race here as a blanket statement, but computers are smarter than people in all aspects. So when you look at some of these people versus computer answers, you're already seeing the AI, the amount of just literal data that can go through that. I think Meta created a quantum computer that was something like 1.2 million times faster than the current quantum computer. When you're talking about surgeries, or you're talking about, this is not talking about brands, but this is talking about solving a problem, which for us is brands a lot of times. A doctor will in no way, shape, or form be able to keep up with a robot, no matter how much experience they have, no matter how many times they've performed the surgery, because even the throw-off scenarios, like heart is stopping, leg fell off, eyes exploded, whatever that is, the data that can pass through the and it's not going to be a chat GPT, but robotic surgeries are already becoming more standard and as successful as human. But one of the things that I think that when you talk about like the personal experience and things like that, there's also that area of coming up with the answer that wasn't expected.
Yes.
And I think that when you look at the Ritz-Carlton example, that is when you talk about brands who do things great, I see it as those who have stuck to their guns and are themselves. Ritz-Carlton is Ritz-Carlton. You're going to go in your room and you're going to have a 70-inch TV and your sheets are going to be great and you're going to want to buy the pillow and all of those things. I think when we look at how a Ritz-Carlton would utilize some of the stuff that we talked about today, I think that's going to be behind the scenes, and it's going to be about making solutions and answering questions that no one even asked. You have someone checking in and you're going to swap the pillow because it's best for them, or you're going to remove gluten because it's best for them. People still make those mistakes, and people are going to continue to make those mistakes. And so what you had mentioned is you think it's going to be processed sooner and then it's going to be about the premium experience. I think AI is just going to be a tool. I think it is going to replace a lot of things and change how we do things, but it's going to be like the Photoshop, like the Figma, like the internet, like online banking, like all the things that we've been through in 25 years. It does move really fast, and it is very important as a tool, but I see it as just the tool right now. And I think maybe that leads to what you were talking about of it being premium to have that human touch. But
well, let me give you a counterfactual to that very quickly, because I don't think we want to rabbit hole this, but think about this. So I totally agree with you. The surgeon's never going to know as much as the system can know, right? We need the surgeon to do the surgery, but at the end of the day, he's not going to outsmart, even today, what a large language model does. But here's another client of ours, a client who does promotional products. Basically, you're going to do a sales show, or you're going to launch a new office, and you need swag, you need baseball caps, you need pens, whatever, right? Turns out what makes one particular promotional products company super sticky is that they understand that for the rep placing the order, which is not the company, it's somebody, a lower mid-level administrative person who gets tasked with go buy stuff for this show, that's a high risk, low reward transaction. It's high risk because usually she, sometimes he, can get fired if the stuff doesn't arrive, if the stuff is janky, if nobody likes it. But they're not going to get a promotion because they bought the best promotional stuff. So in that instance, if a brand has a person on the other end of the line who says, I get it, and I can help, and I can care, and more importantly, if something isn't going to arrive on time, if that person who has helped you with a transaction is able to empathize and say, I'm so terribly sorry. I take this personally. I feel bad for you. The big driver in the motivation of the person making the purchase is, I don't want to be ashamed. I don't want to look bad. I don't want to fail at this high risk, low reward task. Having an empathetic person on the other end of the line, even when it's not a Ritz-Carlton experience, actually can be hugely differentiating, even though objectively the technology could do everything more efficiently. And if you think about an inventory of 20,000 products, they probably could create an infinite number of better shopping baskets. But that's not going to get the premium. The premium's going to be somebody actually cares.
Let me ask you again one counterpoint on that.
Sure.
What if the person on the other end of the line, and I think 2025 is this year, is the year this happens. What if the person on the other end of that line is a robot, but you think it's a human and
Yeah.
has all the intelligence of, and the reason I say that is because we are now getting past the Turing test, which is you don't actually know who you're talking to. And the human, when I see two humans in a high risk situation, you get all the crap of the high risk situation. But what the computer can do and what some of this stuff, and I'm not like pro computers taking over everything, but when you get people together, you could have that clusterfuck moment when the computer can talk you back from the ledge and it could still feel like the human. It could be the persona, that avatar, that, AI being, and you don't even know it is. It's, John at shipping.net or whatever. But it could do more than a person, where it could say, we're late. Empathy isn't going to solve it, but here's what I'm doing. I've rerouted the ship to, instead of go around the Cape of Good Hope, we're going through the Panama Canal. And with a person, you would be, I don't know if the empathy makes up for like the actually achieving and getting it done.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It doesn't. And back to my first comments, checkmate. Nobody knows what that's going to be like because we're not quite there yet. But the fact that we're having this conversation's super interesting. And I would say that, so my PhD's in rhetoric. I've always been interested in how people make decisions, particularly contrary to their interest. One of our biggest drivers in business is avoiding shame. And one of the best ways to get out of a situation in which you've been shamed is to commiserate with people who can see it from your vantage point, see you, and sort of through their acknowledgement, reduce the stress of the shame you're feeling. That's one thing where I think if you feel like there's somebody on the other end of the line who actually cares, it's measurably different and better than just I've rerouted the container ship. Somebody gets it. It's not just me. I didn't totally F it up. Now, that said, I take all of your points and it's uncharted territory. Who knows?
Matt, we're
The
gonna
commiseration piece.
Let's hear maybe from Kelly and Matt also.
Just to jump in, yeah, since you said shame, I'm going to shame myself by saying this, David, but I actually wanted to really talk through Ray's original question, which was great. And I'm going to try to do this without even using the word AI or computer or technology or anything like that. Because I think for the second half of the meeting, everyone's tuned in here to hear from humans about human stuff. And I'd love to hopefully add some value, to everyone. So that was a great question, Ray, though, just about who's doing it right. What sticks out to us as designers, branders, experts in the field. I have a very simple view of what brand means. I think that as the industry has tried to become more and more enlightened and complicate things, I really still try to maintain this very simplistic view. I grew up in a small farm community in a town nobody has ever heard of. And I grew up with my dad branding cattle using a fire brand, iron put into the fire to brand his herd of cattle, marking it, each one individually, with his logo on the hindquarters of this cow, so that when they were in the field, we could identify which cow was his, right? And that's not metaphor. I really view branding as just essentially the identifier, the marker in which a customer can identify the product or service. And I know that's primarily the visual component of the brand, but I always view that as the foundation. And then built upon that is, after the customer is attracted or at least identified their cow, their brand, their product, then the experience that they get when they start to engage with the brand. One that came to mind, actually, I have a Mammut shirt on, and I saw this in my camera, and this is what's making me think of this. They recently rolled out a campaign called Not a Streetwear Brand. Mammut is a technical outerwear company. They're a European-based business that has been around for almost a century. They sell outdoor gear, outerwear, this sort of thing, right? And a lot of their competitors have spent the last 4 years getting highly precious and romantic about elevating their core values, or what they want to be their core values, or maybe even what their agency of record told them should be their core values. And Mammut really anchored in deeper in saying, we're not a streetwear brand. We make technical products for highly specialized purposes. And when I saw that, it was such a breath of fresh air, because like you were saying, Jason, they know who they are. They weren't trying to be somebody else or trying to be who their agency or creative director told them they need to be in order to appeal to the next generation of customer. They are staying true to who they are. Is that always scalable? I don't know, but it is always enduring. It's always going to allow them to weather the storm, because they're not abandoning their original intent, their original customer base. And when I see any brand that does that, Mammut was just an example. There's a lot that do that, but when I see any brand that does that, I always think that is a home run. They are doing exactly what they're doing. When I see a brand that's trying to just marry itself to the trends of the day, I always think that's a divorce that's waiting to happen, So that's my perspective on brand. I try to keep it very, very simple.
Interesting. I'm glad you brought it back around to the question, Kelly, because I agree with a lot of what you were describing. And the one that came to mind right after I pass it to David, we spend a lot of time developing brands in the food and beverage category. And obviously one of the biggest, most sort of oversaturated categories in the market is water, sparkling and still and everything in between. So trying to create a category within the saturated market's impossible. And so a brand that we didn't create, but one that I've been following their case study, many have for recent years, is Liquid Death, which is just such a contrarian brand, but genius, because it worked. Talk about looking at a space that it's there's no more space for it. It's well, what if we did something that was so unexpected that we could create, to your point, Kelly, an identifier that's different from everything else out there. Name is very out of category, and a brand that feels as unappetizing as it gets for something you want to consume, and then flip the script on it and say, not only did I create a brand that is contrarian, but I also found a way to identify an audience that maybe wouldn't buy water, let alone for $2.50 a can. When I could get the same product, and this is what David was talking about earlier, about the irrational decision making, right? The rhetoric about why people make decisions of buying the same product that could cost you 10 cents for the same thing if you bought in a pack of just sort of the store-bought brand water. I teach a class on branding, and I did that Pepsi challenge with still water, with just some sort of generic store-bought brand, kind of mid-level, and then Liquid Death. And I said, had everybody come up and try it, say which one, can you identify which one is Liquid Death? And they all swore up and down they could do it. And out of the 17 students in the class, 15 of them incorrectly guessed Liquid Death. They all picked the cheapest water out there, and they were flabbergasted. That's like $2.50 for something that, because it brought an attitude with it that I wanted to identify, that made me a rabid fan of it.
Versus it didn't even matter. It didn't even matter what was in the bottle. We did the same thing with beers at our office, and everybody's like, well, my favorite beer is, we had everyone write on paper, my favorite beer is, my least favorite beer is, and the cheapest one won. And everybody was like, what do you mean? And actually I don't drink, so I can't give you like a bad beer, but like everyone was like, what do you mean? Whatever light was the one that we all liked the most. And it's like, well, if you remove the shell of the brand, that's what you got. Exactly. I mean, I guess I have a question for everyone here. Has anyone actually bought Liquid Death?
Guilty as charged. Yeah.
I did.
I bought some future. We call it future piss.
Yes. I bought it to see what the hubbub was about, and I felt like an imposter because my age doesn't, like, me walking around with that can did not feel, it felt very disingenuous.
You put it in a glass and you were like wine swirling it, and then you were like sniffing it for hints of like after
subtle
notes.
In a paper bag, right?
And when a business can do water, like when a business can have a brand that has that cachet as well as a product that's objectively better or different, that's the secret, right? Like, so identity is one piece, but quality and innovation is the other piece. And any brand that can have both of those, that's the key to unlock a successful brand.
Great. I love that. All right, guys, we're almost up on the general session time. I almost wish I was part of this conversation as a panelist, because I've been itching to kind of, wanting to say something soon and kind of participate, because what you guys are describing, it's so fascinating, so exciting. And I think there's a lot of food for thought, probably to our audience tuning in live as well, which we will be getting to the Q&A portion of the episode very shortly. But really the last final question of the general session, I think we just want to get an insight into some of the clients that you all have worked with. So we'll do we'll go in a circle here. Jason, we'll start with you. If you could maybe pick out one of the best clients that you've had in your career and why, and also one of the worst clients you've had in your career and why. You don't have to shame them, but we'd like to get an insight of the good kind of clients, the bad kind of clients, and your general work with there. And we'll go in a circle here, but Jason, we'll start it off with you.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not going to talk about a worst client on this in terms of who they are, but I will say that all of the things we've talked about in terms of good brand, bad brand, tools we use, the best clients we've worked with look to us for our brains and our hearts and what we can help them do. And the worst clients we've worked with give us the prescription and feel that that's the only answer, and keep it a very rigid type of thing. We are being industry agnostic. We've worked with like the religion of Buddhism as a brand, and that's so bizarre as a brand. And on the other end, we have like consumer products that may or may not be toxic. And how do you talk about those things differently, and how do you make people care about them? But ultimately, a good client to us can see that there is the value in elevating themselves, believing in their own brand. And when I say that, David was talking about like the highest risk, lowest, like I would never want to take on like a swag for a conference, like design my pens and whatever, unless someone's like, come up with something that's the Liquid Death of that, because we're just putting your logo on a pen that the value is zero, like go give your pens out to people at the conference. But the worst types of relationships are the most prescriptive. And it's because by default, we all love thinking and thinking out of the box and connecting dots that wouldn't be connected otherwise.
Great. And Matt?
Yeah, I'm similar to Jason. I won't name names, but I'll just say that I think for us, some of our favorite clients, and some of them have been with us for almost the full tenure of our business so far, going on sort of our 20 plus years, are ones who value design as the first consideration, not the last consideration for their business. So they value design as a strategic part of their business, and to Jason's point, invite our expertise in to help guide that conversation, both from a brand standpoint, but also from a business standpoint, where what I'm seeing more often, and it's kind of a trend in our swim lane, is kind of the intermingling of business consultation and brand consultation, because the two go hand in hand. They're informing the approach to mergers and acquisitions, or new product development, or service extensions or offerings, where it's like, does the brand have permission to be in this space? I remember Vans shoes, they're not a client of ours, decided to come out with breath mints. And I don't know who decided if that was going to be a good idea or not, but like, Vans shoes probably shouldn't be making a breath mint that you put in your mouth. That brand and fresh breath doesn't seem to sort of make sense.
The manufacturing of shoes and mints does not seem like the same factory.
Doesn't seem right. There's something a little off with that. So just being able to sort of have that, those kinds of conversations with our clients, where they value the work that we bring and the thinking that we bring. I think the telltale sign of a bad client, in our experience, is one of the first things out of their mouth in the first meeting with them is, "We are going to be the best client you've ever had." And it is almost like they've just jinxed it. I run for the hills as quickly as I can, because I just know the complete opposite is going to happen. And I would say probably 95% of the time, it is that exact thing. So
you just hit a number one major superstition point of our whole space. We're the fastest client for turnaround. We're the best client for communication.
Totally.
Love it. Kelly, what about you?
Just like the others I mentioned, we work with a pretty diverse range of brands, products, and services. I mean, and that's primarily because we work with brands who value brand. And so being agnostic from industry, even, we've worked with Philips Television is probably one of the larger ones, Philips Electronics, because of their history and the scale of their business as a global brand with all their licensees. That's been a massive one. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum of that, we actually work with a lot of scrappy startups, like new brands that are just launching, and they come to us because they really, from the beginning, want to make sure that they can differentiate themselves. And so I love working with both, enterprise level clients, as well as like the startups that don't have any money to spend. And it might be just because I'm a glutton for punishment, but I like that building phase. And because of that, we've been brought into a lot of M&A conversations. And that's really cool to see, like you were talking about, Matt, being involved with clients that understand and value design and branding enough to bring us into like merger and acquisition discussions with potential buyouts. Like, that's huge. Like, that gives me such a good, I'm like, I love this client. They really understand the importance of doing this right and thinking about it from the start. So yeah, I wasn't trying to name names or anything like that, but that's kind of something that I really appreciate and value with the clients, is just they understand the importance and value of brand and design.
Love that. David, you're up next. Oh, it looks like you're muted on my end,
Sorry.
David.
It's a tough question. I think you fall in love with all good clients in different ways, right? So it's like, which kid do you like best? What's your favorite pet? But as I think about it, I think my favorite clients have been clients on the service side where they understand the people are the product that differentiates them. So I'm thinking specifically about the Marriott portfolio, and within that, the Ritz-Carlton. Wonderful people, a wonderful client, but also from top to bottom in the organizational hierarchy, incredibly good at keeping brand values front and center and ensuring that great service gets rewarded and acknowledged, and problems with service, which are never bad people problems, but they get identified and fixed through lasting processes. They're fantastic at that. Delta Airlines, another great brand we think of as a transportation brand, but I'd say they're a people brand. Amazon, people are their product too, but in a different way. And from a cultural standpoint, we've worked with lots of tech companies, from Amazon to Google. Amazon's way at one end of the spectrum. They actually are a fabulous client. They were fabulous to work with because they're so fast. Their decision making is so fast. The leadership principles at Amazon allow decision making to be pushed way down into the organization, and people have tremendous autonomy and empowerment to make decisions about stuff that's hugely impactful. So I probably put those at the top. I'm not going to name any names on the worst, but I'll say I've got my own. It's going to be a bad client relationship when ... indicator. And that's bad chemistry. It's just like feeling like you're trying to dance and you're both all left feet, and you can just never connect with who that person is. Even if they're a really nice person, it's just like, I don't get you and I don't think you get me. If you have a couple of meetings like that, you just think, oh God, no matter how well we do, this is just going to be hard, you know? And you're usually right when that's what happens.
Great. I love that. Well, gentlemen, that concludes a general session. Those are some really valuable insights. We'll now move into the audience Q&A. We're going to keep the questions and answers under 20 seconds. We have about 5 minutes remaining for this episode. So to our audience members tuning in live, if you go to the LinkedIn page, there's a link that'll allow you to raise your hand and be brought up on stage. I'll bring you up. You could keep your camera off. So don't be shy. It looks like we already have someone coming up now. And while I bring that person up, there was a question that was posted beforehand, which I'm excited that this was posted because I think it was a very hot topic as of recent. But the question is, what are your thoughts on the recent Jaguar rebrand? Who wants to take this one on? And let's keep this down to maybe less than 30 seconds or so.
I'll just say, love it.
Okay.
It's another case study I use in the class that I teach, and I'll just say, I think more will be revealed. I think that there's that initial reaction that feels like there was a turning the back on current customers, but whether that move was by intention, I think more will be revealed. So I'm trying to hold back all judgment until we get to see more of it, but it definitely was an abrupt shift from the Jaguar we knew, and we'll see what comes of it in the future.
Yesterday, the Jaguar design team memo leaked that 2 years ago they said, maybe we shouldn't outsource this whole thing because it was outsourced to Accenture to redo Jaguar. Why? I mean, they had great designers. And so the memo was out from I think a creative director within Jaguar who was like, I don't think this makes sense for Jaguar. And so
they don't think. Maybe. I'm being harsh, but I have never purchased a Jaguar, and I don't plan on ever purchasing a Jaguar. So I'd be pretty presumptuous to have too strong an opinion about it. But just from a purely design and creative standpoint, I didn't think it was A+ work.
Okay, great. And Paul, we have you on stage to ask the first question. If you want to go unmute and ask, you'll be free to do so.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I was typing away because I was thinking, like, you got me thinking, like, wouldn't it be interesting to create AI bots where you teach them your brand and your culture, so that you and us as creatives could use them as in place of like focus group testing or what have you, where you can bounce ideas off them. You could test messaging. You might even develop a new product, right? Like Liquid Death, because you taught this thing so well that you were able to say, hey, let's go in some new and interesting directions. I mean, as opposed to customer service is there, right? It's getting pretty darn close where these AI can help you with customer service questions, but I'm thinking about us as creatives and using it beyond that. What are your thoughts?
Well, I started that thread. I'll quickly jump in. Hey, Paul, good to see you. I think one of the really interesting opportunities is co-ideation, where the customer, the end consumer, the personas, all of these barriers kind of break down, and there's a bigger table, more rapid prototyping, lots of much faster testing is possible. And yeah, I can see bots being a huge part of that, because it doesn't all have to be at the same time and in the same place. And by the way, if you do that right and you really are dialed in on your brand, you're going to get a much more clearly delineated position than we're able to today, just because so many more points of feedback in the mix.
Yeah, I even hate sorry, I used the word bot. Maybe it's even being, it's an AI being, right? Because, you really want it to get to the point where, it can shape, like we were talking about, like even the experience, like maybe it's predictive in how, this content needs to be up higher and more prominent. These stories need to be elevated as opposed to those, because they're connecting with even this AI being. So it's just like again, a way to kind of get yourself in a greater place, right? And establish what you hope is a human connection at the end of the day.
Great. Love it. All right. Well, this is going to conclude our time. To our audience tuning in live, if you want to send up a follow-up question after the session is recorded, just email that to us and we'll get it routed to the speakers. And in the post-event email, you also get direct access to the speakers. So if there's any clients, anyone interested in speaking to our panelists, you could do that right after. And of course, our expert speakers, thank you so much. It's been super valuable. It's been a pleasure moderating and hosting this conversation today. I've personally learned a lot, and I think you guys are all tremendous and brilliant. I enjoyed the little debate that was happening earlier too. Like I said, I had some thoughts that I kind of wanted to jump in as well, but it was really great to hear it all kind of on the sidelines. We'll wrap it up here. So reach out through the post-event email if you want to get in touch with any of the speakers. That being said, we'll go off live here now, and have a great rest of your day, and everyone, happy Friday and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.